Well, welcome everybody. I'm Lucia Dettori. I'm the intern dean at the Jarvis College of Computing and Digital Media, which is here. And I want to welcome you here in this room and all of the guests that are following us on the webinar online. This is the way things go nowadays, so we're all used to it. Very excited to host this celebration of the CS for All movement, and specifically of the CS graduation requirement in CPS here at the Paul, but more importantly in this room. So this room, as some of you have seen some familiar faces, is where a lot of this work started. So in this very room, there were over, many hundreds of teachers that sat where you're sitting. And for the first time, we're exposed to exploring computer science curriculum and the professional development that came with it, that kind of learned with each other about the new curriculum. And I feel like this is where that CS community of CS teacher kind of was born. So it's a very special place for this celebration. The community continued to work and grow. And so I want to take this moment to recognize all the teachers that have been part of this growing community, and also recognize the people that we've lost, some of the teachers that we've lost in this last few years. Their effort is the effort of these teachers is just critical, has been critical to the success of this initiative. The teachers are the ones that are in and day out, working with every single students. And so really the teachers are the conduit for the success of this initiative. Today, you'll be hearing from some of the pioneers, some of the founding members of this effort, those that have carried the torch, as well as those that are pushing the movement forward today and in the future. The work has been supported by CAFE CS, which is the Chicago Alliance for Equity in Computer Science. There was a lot of cafe, a lot of coffee actually that supported this work over the time. And I think this has been a critical ingredient for the success of this initiative. This is a partnership, as shown here, with Chicago Public Schools. They've been, part of this partnership from the beginning. Some CS, there were teachers and administrators from Chicago Public Schools. Some are here, some will talk. CS faculty at 3 of the universities in Chicago. I was here from the Paul. We have Dale Reed from UIC somewhere in here. We have Ron Grimberg from Loyola, and in the audience we have Andy from CPS. Don, I think, is not here. And also our colleagues that do educational research from the Learning Partnership. Stephen is here, will be our MC today, and also Randy, a few of the other staff from the Learning Partnership, and Partner to Improve, which is our evaluator and how we like to call him our critical friend. So that keeps us in check. CAFE CS has helped the initial expansion of CS and CPS, as well as done a lot of work for supporting the implementation of the CS graduation requirement through grant funding. I know that some of our funders are here, so we thank you all. Some development as well as research to inform whether the steps that we were taking were working. Today, now that we have 2 cohorts of students that have graduated under this, since the introduction of the graduation requirement, thanks to a grant from the CME Foundation, we were able to do a study on the impact of the CS graduation requirement on the state of CS and CPS in Chicago Public Schools. And so you'll get a sneak preview of the results from some of the fellows that have done the research. At this point, I'd like to pass my virtual mic to Brenda Wilkerson, which was one of the founders and visionary for this effort. At the time when we started 12 years ago or so, she was in charge of Korean technical education at Chicago Public Schools, and she joined this, was a critical ingredient for the vision and the success of this effort. She can't be here today. She's on a very well-deserved vacation. She's now the CEO of AnitaB.org, very busy lady, but she sent a few words by video to take us back to that time.
See if this works.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brenda Darden Wilkerson, and I'm so excited to get to share with you, unfortunately via video this time. I got a chance to take a really quick vacation, and I'll be traveling back tomorrow at the very time that this event is taking place. So I'm really sorry that I won't get to be together with you, but I'm excited that this conversation is happening. I just wanted to take a moment to share just a bit with you about a little bit of the history of CS for All. First of all, what was the vision of CS for All? Well, I just remember that when I showed up at CPS, that computer science was only resident in 6 high schools. And having been a technologist, that really, I was an accidental technologist because I hadn't been exposed in high school prior to going to college to computer science, I knew that that didn't make sense. And I was fortunate enough to be able to meet some amazing people who believe the very same thing. And so the vision of CS for All, of this group, was that we needed to change this reality. We needed to push against the inertia that thought that there were only certain students who should have access to this amazing education. And so we worked to bring about that change. And one of the most important parts of that change was curriculum that would teach computer science differently than all of us how we had learned it when we were going to college, or however we learned computer science. And that provided amazing training for teachers, because we had to create supply where there had been no demand for computer science in the past. And so I know you're going to hear more about that from Gail Chapman and all the amazing work that she did and folks in LA did around the ECS curriculum, key ingredient for the work that we did. So other than the fact that there were only 6 schools that had computer science education, it wasn't required. I mean, as everyone knows, the graduation requirements that most of us have experienced in our lifetimes is based upon something from the early 20th century, even the 19th century. And so we started to try to bring computer science into schools, but you know, the way education works in our nation, unfortunately, budgets are based upon what's required. And so it became clear that if we were going to succeed at seeing computer science actually available to all students, that we had to change those rules. That meant putting together a policy, changing policy, creating a graduation requirement that made CS its own graduation requirement. Now, this was a little different because a lot of people in states, and they've had some success with this, have made computer science a math requirement, or they've made it a science requirement. But we wanted to make it so that not just exceptional students who got past all of their math and science could get computer science, but that all students, remember, computer science for all, that really just names the vision. And so I'm happy to say, and as we all know now, we have that graduation in Chicago, and I don't really know if other people have done that yet. So what an amazing accomplishment that we were all able to do together. So the vision was everybody should get it. The graduation requirement made it happen, and I'm so excited that as of 2020, all students in Chicago Public School are required to have at least one course, and many are having more, and that amazing curriculum has been pushed out across the district. And I just want to say thank you to everyone who had anything to do with that, and for all of you who are still tirelessly working to make that a reality across the country, thank you. And I hope to get to be with you next time.
Room to rah-rah the troop at that time, and so this is historic, really. So our next speaker, we've talked about the Exploring Computer Science curriculum. This is the curriculum that was chosen as the initial curriculum for implementation of this computer science requirement, as well as in general, the expansion of CS in CPS. And so we are lucky to have Gail Chapman, which was one of the original, still one of the co-authors. I don't know how many versions we have, but certainly another one of those
right now
that have tireless work with this, as well as designer and facilitator for the professional development that many of you teachers here in Chicago have gone through to prepare for teaching this curriculum. And I'll let Gail talk about that a little bit.
All right. So why ECS, I think, is the critical question. Brenda articulated the whole CS for All idea beautifully, as always. And so I'm not going to repeat the facts of why CS for All or what CS for All was in Chicago. But what I can say is that ECS had been developed recently to address exactly those same issues in LA Unified School District, which has similar demographics to Chicago Public Schools. So it was a natural fit when they came looking for a curriculum. And so we decided that we—
Excuse me, sorry, we forgot to send it back out to the Zoom people.
Oh.
There we go.
So do you
Sorry,
want
Zoom
to,
people.
So do you want me to start over?
No, you can keep, no, they can hear you, they just couldn't see your slide.
Oh, okay, well, they didn't, okay. All right, so that's never happened to me before, you can't imagine. So there's a reason that I'm not technically inclined overall. So we came to Chicago with ECS, and the screensaver wants to come on again, right? A little description of the curriculum for those who are not familiar with it. We started with overarching themes, 3 themes that are still very much prevalent today: creativity, technology as a tool for solving problems, and relevance of computer science. And I think one of the things that I would add to that is technology is a tool for solving some problems, because often it doesn't solve the problem. So students need to have some creative ways to deal with it when it's not working, like having somebody come and fix it while you're talking. So those were the 3 starting points that we said students all need to have this to be citizens in the global world. So my 5 minutes are up.
Okay, not sure why it's not showing.
So the curriculum in and of itself is almost irrelevant. I mean, it's not irrelevant. It's an important set of curricular materials for teachers to use in their classrooms, a set of lesson guides built around 6 topics that could have been almost any topic in computer science, but to give students the idea of what the breadth of computing is. We have some lessons that are particularly focused on culturally responsive notions, unplugged activities, etc. Right? But at the heart of it all is the professional development. And did that come up or not?
I'm not sure it's working fine during the rehearsal.
Okay, well, you know, it's fine. Let me just say, for those of you who remember what Lucia said a while ago, that this room was where PD happened. Many, many, many PDs. And let me tell you, the room did not look like this. I wouldn't even recognize the room, because the room was set up for collaboration, for teachers to work together to look at the lessons that are in the curriculum, figure out together what are some ways they could teach those lessons that would really respond to students' own personal desires and interests and enact those for their peers so that then they could find out how that great idea that they thought they had worked with real people. Granted, they were teachers, but they were teachers that were acting as students. And so during the course of that time, they had these opportunities to reflect in a safe environment, to practice, and with the goal over a 2-year period to be empowered to do these kinds of things in their classrooms, because the reality is that computer science changes daily. So teachers can't just be stuck in whatever happens to be there. They also talk about the topics that are raised in Stuck in the Shallow End, which was the inspiration for the course in the first place. So they address race directly, right? And the systemic oppression that continues to exist. All of this led by ECS teachers who have been developed through a leadership program. This was a necessary ingredient for there ever to be a hope of having CS for all in a school district as big as Chicago Public Schools. And I think that is probably the thing that tells me my time is up. And you're going to hear, you can get more information on our website, but you're going to hear a lot of different research topics coming up that reinforce what I said, I think.
All right, thank you, Gail. Not myself, but we can problem solve. So I'm actually sharing from this screen via the Zoom. So you can continue on. All right, so my name is Steve McGee. I'm president of the Learning Partnership and one of the members of the Chicago Alliance for Equity in Computer Science. Just going to give a little bit of an overview of what we're about to see. And so the one thing we just wanted to highlight is thanking the CME Foundation for funding this particular evaluation. As you'll see at the end, there's a lot of funding that has gone into the whole effort, but this particular research was funded by the CME. And just to give a little bit of context to Cafe CS and the work that we've done together, we would sort of go back over a decade to what we consider the formative years of the CS for All movement here in Chicago. And one of the things to think back to in the late 2010s, 2005 to 2010, there was a lot of consternation. There's basically the number of graduates in computer science was declining significantly. There's a lot of concern about, is this an ongoing trend? What can we do? And one of the things, at least here in Chicago, was thinking about, we need to involve K-12 and introduce computer science in the high school to increase the number of students interested in going into computer science. So in CPS, as Brenda had mentioned, CS primarily was in CTE and AP courses, reinforce inequities and participation. And as Brenda said, the group sort of said everyone should have access to computer science. So in 2012, the group that ended up becoming Cafe CS came together to bring ECS to Chicago, bring Gail physically to Chicago to launch the initiative. But it's very interesting, after a couple of years of work, that Gail no longer came out to run the professional development. It was CPS teachers training other CPS teachers. And then the CS for All plan was announced a year into the initiative to say, we need a graduation requirement. And actually ahead of schedule, a mere 3 years later, the graduation requirement was enacted. And then actually Cafe CS formalized, we said, well, we're working together, we should actually form into a formal group in 2017. And then 2020, we had the first cohort graduate. And then interestingly, 2021, the state of Illinois started to really think long and hard about what we should be doing, and has now mandated not a graduation requirement, but at least every high school should offer at least one class in computer science. And then just say a little bit about what we call research practice partnership. Practitioners and researchers working together. There are 4 ways in which a research practice partnership can support school districts. One is through funding, bringing programs or designing programs, conducting research, and then informing policy. And I think the development of this enactment of the graduation policy, I think, showed all of those things working together. So the initial NSF funding brought Exploring Computer Science to Chicago, the corresponding research that we're able to conduct to show how it was working in Chicago and what the effectiveness was, I think really enabled the school district to say, we can do this. You'll see there's a lot of bravery there because there was a long way to go from 2016 to 2020. But I think that initial pilot testing and research really helped set that foundation. So what we're going to do is present some of the preliminary findings from our summer research fellows. So the CME Foundation funded through a national search, we selected 6 early career researchers and graduate students who looked at different aspects of the data from CPS around the impact of the graduation requirement. And we used as a framework, this it's called the CAPE framework, which says when you're looking at how can we help impact students, you need to go upstream to first of all think about capacity, building the capacity of the district to then gain access to computer science, and through that access ensure that there's equity of participation of all students, and then through that participation and experience to then be able to look at outcomes. Oh, I think I talked before I showed the slide. So increasing access to computer science, equitable participation in CS, and then lastly, how does the impact of the student experience, how does that impact outcomes? All right, so our first speaker will be on looking at building capacity through professional development. We have Regina Winters from the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs.
Hi, I am Regina Winters, and I want to thank you all for sharing your data with us. This has been a great opportunity. So for me, looking at capacity, one of the things that I wanted to drill down to understand a little bit more was how professional development worked inside of the school district before the computer science requirement and then after. And so as we look at the next few slides, that's really what I am looking at specifically. What we have here is a map that basically tells the story of how this voluntary participation in in professional development really sort of spread throughout the district. Now, a couple things to note, the ratio that we're using in terms of this idea of sufficiency, what you see in the green is really a 600-to-1 ratio of 1 teacher to 600 computer science students. And so as we're looking at the school district's efforts over time, we see that it's growing, right? And so as we're looking at this particular point in time, this is where we see the institution of the graduation requirement just before. And we see that there are a lot of schools that are inside of the green, you see that there's more in the red and less in the green. But right after that computer science requirement is enacted, we start to begin to see the momentum not only build, but to really expand in a really big way. So that by the end, as we're looking at for the last couple of years, we see that the majority of the schools that are subject to the computer science requirement in some way have at least 1 teacher who is who fulfills this idea of sufficiency. Now, I also want to talk about a slightly different story that's sort of embedded in the green. And as we look at what that story is, it's really about who's participating inside of this idea of ECS professional development and who's taking that and who is part of what we what we consider to be qualified in that sense of having taken part of those professional development workshops, or who has invested in a computer science requirement. Over time, for the life of the study, we find that about 76% of the teachers who are identified as being teaching at least one ECS course have partial to fully qualifications inside of ECS, meaning that they have participated in the workshops, or if they're fully, they've done them all, right? And so it's been growing and growing each year by year in terms of that voluntary, meeting that voluntary participation requirement. It tracks with this idea of sufficiency. But beyond that, as we're looking at the reasons for the professional development, and really where we leave the story at with that final year, is that the idea that professional development also connects up to student experiences, that as we're looking at the why of that professional development, it is to enrich the student experience. And so looking at regression analysis to try and understand how that professional development helped student outcomes as defined as their grades. Essentially, what did that look like in terms of how those students that were lucky enough to be taught by a fully qualified ECS professional developed teacher. And so in general, for computer science students overall, we see that first, that there's more of these teachers available, so there's better access. But secondly, there's this other interesting finding that came out of the data. For students that were able to take ECS from a professionally, a fully qualified, meaning that they have both the computer science endorsement and have also completed all the ECS training, there was a slight bump in their grade performance. But it was only for a very specific type of student. Those that were first year, meaning that they were novices to computer science in their high school years. And for those particular students, there seemed to have been just a slight effect of being able to take their computer science courses with an ECS fully professionally qualified teacher. Now this bump only sort of lasts for the first implementation year, so in 2008. And afterwards, it starts to wane and normalize. And really what that talks about is that over the life cycle of this computer science requirement, the professional development, that difference that might be, gets normalized throughout the district, which is kind of amazing. And so I have a colleague that will talk a little bit more about why that normalization is so interesting for us as we've been going through the data. And so with that, I'm going to let Dr. Stephen take it over.
All right, thank you, Regina. Brandon, who's one of the early adopters and volunteer teachers for ECS, to share a little bit about her experience with the professional development.
Yes.
And facilitating for
Facilitating,
this
coordinating, all the above. So yeah, thank you so much for allowing me to come and say a few words. This room is very special to me. Many years ago, when I was voluntold that I was gonna have to be a part of this training, I think I was given maybe a 2 or 3 day warning that, hey, there's a training going on downtown. The original teacher couldn't make it, so you have to go. So I was like, hey, I'll go. Not sure what it is, but I may not even teach it, but I'll go. And so I remember coming in and there was this room of these intimidating people. Dale was there, Gal was there, Baker was there, Don was there. Well, Don has this smile. If you know Don, he has a smile on his face, so it's hard to really be intimidated by him. But it was just this environment, like what was mentioned, like the room was totally different. There were all these tables, there were curriculum, books, and it was just very goodies. But it was very overwhelming, but you saw teachers that looked like me. And I was like, okay, so I'm not sure what this is, but I'm gonna enjoy the ride. So Monday, it was intense. We had a wonderful model lesson and they were teaching us computer science, but I still was trying to understand, like, what is this? I've never experienced this. There's a lot of hands-on, there's a lot of modeling. Like, I'm just used to being told, here's a curriculum, just do it. And so I'm just like in awe of like what we're supposed to do. We were put in groups, we got to mingle, we got to connect. And I was like, I think this is different. And I think I like this. And I think these people are really good. And so as the week went on, I just developed this sense of like, this is a space that cares about me. And they made it happen by making us all feel comfortable. Like I instantly felt like family. And to this day, I've got a lot of them on speed dial, and I know that I can always go to them. And it's such a support system that I never imagined. And it changed who I was as a person and as well as a teacher, because it was my second year of teaching. It was right at the critical time where I knew the content of what I was teaching, but I just could not engage my students. And so that curriculum really taught us like how to step back. It's not about me, it's about the students. And the environment and the tools that we learned were just awesome. And we were able to model it. And we were in a space that I could fail, but I could fail with the comfort of knowing that they weren't going to judge me. Because at first, if you know anything about CPS, you feel like everybody's watching you. And so, but I was like, no, they're not. Well, they're watching me, but watching me to give me critical feedback to help me feel better and do better. And it was different. And so I was like, this is great. But I'll tell you, it was intimidating because at the end of the 5 weeks, I'm excited. I was like, I can do it. I've got all the support I need. These people said I can do it. I've demonstrated in the lesson, which the lesson was interesting. The tower building was an interesting lesson that I demonstrated, but I was still excited that this curriculum that I was just introduced to, I was excited to go in and show my students that they could do it just like I did it. And so I did it. I was intimidated, but I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do the best that I can. And I know my students will enjoy it just like I did. And so come back the second year, because it's the way in which the PD is set up, you come back the second year. And I felt so good to share out like, I made it and I want to do this again. And I can't believe that this has not been out before. And where has this gold, this diamond been all of our teachers' lives, quote unquote. And I was just amazed at how impactful it was. And the same people gave me the same love and support that second year. And my family, I felt like I was going right back to family. And it goes to speak to like, it's not about like what we're teaching, it's about the support that we get as we're teaching it, because I believe a lot of curriculums could have much more impact if we considered how we're teaching it or how we're teaching our students. Because my students will speak to me about, Ms. Brandon, I like coming into your class because I feel safe. I know I have an opinion. I know my voice is respected. I just feel comfortable. Like, I really don't like going to those other classes because I just don't have a voice. And it's because the way in which this curriculum is written that it's just awesome. Like, the easy job is just me coming in and just doing what the curriculum is outlined. Like, I feel bad that I'm taking the credit for all this wonderful work that's happening in this curriculum. And I don't know how I could still be teaching without ECS. I really don't. And I look forward to see what's next as it relates to other curriculums that adopt the ECS way in learning and creating a support system. Because for me, I know I need the support to build my capacity. So as my capacity builds, I need the support system that comes along. One of the important things that Brenda, that I worked for, she said, each year you have to love and support teachers and you have to rinse and repeat. And I hope that we can have a system, a PD system, or just a community that we're loving and supporting our teachers, and we're rinsing and repeating each year, because we need this, because we've only just begun. We've only just begun, but I look forward to continuing to support teachers as they come into this wonderful community of ECS. And as I coordinated, and when I was coordinating, working for the Office of Computer Science, I was so excited to see the teachers day one and compared to day 3, because I knew that they would be hooked. And I knew it was something that they would enjoy, because I believe that in computer science, we all have like a superpower. And there's something that we all get excited about in computer science, and that I hope that we can take that to our classrooms. And so I think that once they take ECS and come in and take this PD, that there's a certain joy that comes out, and that they get excited to come again and again and get connected to the community. And so that's why I always loved coordinating and getting teachers in, because I knew we would hook them. I knew we would hook them. So, and facilitating is great as well, because we get to continue to help them build their capacity and grow. And it's just something that I will always be a part of, because I love it. So thank you.
Okay. And hopefully those not familiar with ECS can really understand the passion that ECS can develop.
It is not a
but-
cult.
It is.
So that gives a sense of the work that was done to build the capacity of the district and have teachers that were available. So now we're going to turn to is to look at how access increased as a function of that capacity, and invite up Dunshing Ying to present on access.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. And I have to say too, it's such an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. So hi, everyone. My name is Dunshing Yin. I'm a mixed method researcher and PhD candidate. I major in education, but I grew up in a family with both of my parents having STEM degrees, advanced degrees. So it's very exciting. It's truly exciting for me to learn about CAFECS, ECS, and all those science efforts that are happening here in CPS and in Chicago. So today I'm gonna share with you some of my findings on working on computer science
Actually on this
access.
computer over here.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you. So my research question is around computer science access and how that changed over the past 9 school years since 2012. So I used data to answer the following questions. What was the trend of CPS high schools in offering computer science courses before and after the graduation requirement enacted? And what might explain the changes of CS access among the CPS high schools? So here are some of the observations. So from this figure, we can read from it that the numbers of schools that offered computer science even before the graduation requirement has increased within each one of the school years. And before the graduation requirement enacted, we see CPS already did a good job, as evidenced by these growing numbers. But after the graduation requirement enacted, we can see even more and larger increases among all those years, especially right after the graduation requirement put in place. So what was more salient here, as you can see, marked in orange bars, are those growing numbers. And in another word, we see there's an overall upward trend of the CS access among CPS high schools over the 9 school years. And what has been accelerated in particular was happening after the graduation policy enacted. So the findings are quite consistent with previous literature and the report written by a lot of our audience, and also the Chicago Consortium report, that in 2009, we see about 34% of the high schools here offered any kind of computer science, while 1 decade after that, we see that number doubled. And after that, the number went on even more than double. So knowing the trend here, then I became interested in knowing about the factors that might have impact on the changes for computer science. So the first factor I was able to track from the regression models is that about the school sizes measured by the number of student enrollment at each school. So this factor of school size affected the CS access to the computer science access. The larger the school enrollment a school has in a given year, the more likely that it has access to a computer science courses, especially before the policy enacted, with all other things equal. And the second major factor that had significant impact on CS access is what we call the social economic indicator that is measured by the free percentage of students receiving free and reduced lunch. And in our research, we find that the higher percentage of school population that were from such backgrounds, the less likely a school has access to a computer science, especially before the policy enacted. And the third factor here is a school performance measure. It is called school quality rating score. And that also significantly impact the CS access. So the higher unit of such score is linked to having more access to computer science especially. And in particular, this percentage we see in the ECCE score represent the percentage of students graduating from a school who have earned at least 1 credit from an approved early college course, a 3+ on AP course, or a 4+ on IB exam, or an approved career certification. So these factor, this percentage significantly impact the CS access. So these are some of my major findings from my research. And lastly, I want to say that it is truly impressive for me to see this growing trend. And I want to thank Dr. Stephen for having me in the team. And I want to thank the CPS district for providing and collecting such meaningful data. Thank you so much.
All right, so we talked about professional development as a key ingredient for this growth. So now I invite Troy Williams to come up and share some of the other key ingredients to make the magic happen.
Well, hello, everybody. It's nice to see all of you. I know at least 50% of the people in the room. I miss you guys. So there's a lot to unpack in what the last presenter just talked about, but that's not what I'm here for. So I just want to say, first of all, to one of the slides or one of the data points that the young lady just talked about, that growth that you saw going into the announcement of the graduation requirement, I believe that credit goes to the implementation of the ECS curriculum within the CTE IT pathways. And also there were some standalone courses outside of CTE that use course codes that leverage the ECS curriculum. So that momentum had been building for years with the work that Gail and Faith and the Cafe CS team, Dale and team. So that had a lot to do with it. As far as the continued growth and the implementation of the graduation requirement, one of the things that we wanted to do, we formed the Office of Computer Science. So we wanted to form a team because we knew we had to get into the business of the schools. It was a lesson we learned from the CTE programs. There were program coordinators that went out, had conversations with teachers, with administrators, so on and so forth. So we needed to know what were the barriers to implementation, because obviously to that point, things weren't moving. And so sitting down, having those conversations with the prospective teachers, and people hear me say this all the time, sick of it, teachers are the gatekeepers to student success, regardless of the subject matter. That's my little mantra that I like to say. And so to Faith's point, putting that love behind those teachers in the form of making them feel comfortable with not being comfortable in the implementation of computer science curriculum was very key. We needed to know, okay, so, and so going into the schools and having a high level understanding of what the vision was for the school leadership, what the resources were, whether it's financial, people resources, figuring out how to share resources, working with the Cafe CS team, with CME, with Google, with other entities to try to help get funding to level out some of that inequity that was going on. These were the conversations that needed to be had. Also, you had schools with leadership that were very focused on, or very adamant about having this programming for their students. But computer science at the time was looked at as an elective, which prior to graduation requirement it was, but with the implementation of the graduation requirement, we needed to debunk the myth that it's an elective. Now we got to be really serious about it. And so coming up with documentation for implementation plans for a gradual rollout when needed. So, I want to offer it to all of my freshmen, or I want to offer it to all of my juniors, and then work my way down and work my way up. We had to have the team really focus on what the needs were so that we could help support to fill those gaps by connecting the dots from a professional development standpoint, but then also from a how to leverage your internal resources. Oftentimes, there were teachers who attended ECSPD and had the proper training, but the principal didn't even know. So keeping track of all of the data, leveraging some of the findings that the Learning Partnership and CAPACS provided, and putting together packages for the individual schools so that they can have a high level understanding of how we can do this. Bringing together the like schools and sometimes unlike schools. What I mean by that is we have schools that are small in population, and you may have one or two who had figured out how to do implementation with little resources, letting the school leaders work together to understand, because nothing is better, and that's also showed in the ECS model, is peer learning. So learning from one principal, speaking to another principal, and sometimes sharing resources, making sure that they had the opportunity to network together, and just trying to be very holistic in the approach to how implementation could happen. And so as we started helping the schools put together implementation plans and they started fulfilling those implementation plans, making sure we tried to stay 2 steps ahead to be able to help them manage their growth. Once implementation happened with the one course, oftentimes ECS was the intro course. Now, how do we expand that? How do we connect with dual credit, dual enrollment? How do we connect with city colleges? How do we connect with our 4-year colleges to make sure we're preparing our students properly, how to have a focus? And so just really getting a high level understanding, knowing that we didn't know everything, bringing everyone to the table, and just loving on everybody and connecting the dots and finding the resources was the foundation of how this initiative was able to grow. And that was key. So with that said,
Troy.
thanks.
All right, well, we can build it, but will they come? So now we're going to talk, have some data around student participation and how that has grown over the years. And we'll start with Aaron Park.
Hi, everyone. It's nerve-wracking to be here. In front of educators and people in academia. I haven't done public speaking in a while, but bear with me. So my name is Aaron Park. I'm a former teacher, STEM teacher, urban public school before becoming a doctoral candidate at St. Louis University. I grew up in LAUSD and I took a computer science course myself. I miserably failed an AP Computer Science A exam, but had I taken ECS course, I think I would have been in a different place today. Here to now. So today we'll talk. I'll talk about overall impact of the graduation requirement on computer science, participation by race, ethnicity, and gender. And before I start, I would like to clarify that 2012 to 13's cohort is equivalent to class of 2016, and it means that they entered the freshman year in that cohort label. So here you'll see the dotted line and solid line. This means that pre-treatment years and the post-treatment year, and gray line indicates the males, and orange lines indicate females. So here we see that there is some type of gender gap in the pre-treatment years, and once the graduation requirement was enacted for 2016-17 cohort and 17-18 cohorts, we see a decrease in that gender gap, and there is a significant increase in number of students who participate in computer science. And next, we'll look at some growth in participation numbers by race and ethnicity, starting with Asian, white, Black, and Hispanic students. And here in this slide too, we also have dotted line and solid lines. So first, Asian students were the blue lines, white students were gray, orange lines were Black students, and green lines were Hispanic students. For each of these racial and ethnic groups, there is a significant increase in student participation in computer science. And also for Pacific Islanders, Hawaiian students, Native American and Alaska Native students, and Native American and multiracial students in Chicago Public Schools, there are significant increases for their participation in computer science as well. Next, we also looked at the representation of students in computer science courses, similar to representation within the district. And in most of the cases, the representation of students in CS courses were similar to the representation within the district. One growth that we hopefully CPS makes is completely closing that gender gap. We see how the male students and female students each account for 50% of the district population, and male students still are slightly overrepresented by 52%, and female students are slightly underrepresented by 48%. So in sum, Chicago Public Schools significantly increased the number of students participating in computer science across all demographic categories, and I think that's a huge celebration to make. And by second cohort, subject to the graduation requirement, the representation of students taking computer science reflected the representation within the district as a whole. And the third takeaway from my research was that computer science participation of students who are English language learners tripled for the first cohort and more than quadrupled for the second cohort compared to the previous cohorts, which were unaffected by the graduation requirement. And I think this third takeaway is especially important as a former ELL teacher in Boston. In my previous experience, ELL students are often held to lower expectation by the school districts and teachers and school leaders. And the fact that they are now held to the same expectation as all the other students within the district, I think that is a huge celebration to make. And our research shows that English language learners are accessing and participating in computer science education along with general education students.
Teresa Lansford up, and I think this really highlights the all and the commitment to CS for all. So she's going to talk about the impact on students with disabilities.
My name is Teresa Lansford, and I really appreciate the opportunity to look at this subgroup of students over the summer. Before we get into talking about what I noticed, let's talk for a minute about why we would want to look at this particular subgroup of students. It's important to note the benefits of computer science for the general population, for all students. We see improved self-efficacy, improvements in computational thinking, problem solving, and that computer science has an application in a variety of fields once they're in school, if they're solving problems in math, science, social studies, even English, but also beyond in the workforce. Variety of workforce fields now incorporate computers, so preparing students in that way. And so we know the benefits of computer science, and then we have this catalyst of the graduation requirement. And then we have these hoped for outcomes for students with disabilities. First is reframing their peer group image so that they can see themselves in computer science, that they are computer scientists, that it's for them. And often this group may not have role models in the computer sciences yet. And so generating some of that and seeing that we're creating a neurodiverse computer science student body and hopefully beyond, because there is a trend in STEM to recognize that students who think differently are an asset. And so helping to build that STEM community that's more neurodiverse is a hopeful outcome. Next, the requirement would provide more access to coursework, because hopefully students who are seeing themselves as computer scientists would then want to take even more courses in computer science. And then while not in the scope of this study, thinking about students being workforce ready, having those increased post-secondary opportunities, which might include things like technical school or four-year college, but also programming boot camps and things where students can really have access to quality jobs in the workforce. And so what did we see? Well, when we look at the participation, this graph's going to be the percent of each subgroup that was enrolled in computer science across these cohorts. And you'll notice not every subgroup is there. These are the ones that we had enough numbers to do a quality study of. And so we see things like our students that are deaf or have hearing impairments. You see this trend of going upwards, anticipating that graduation requirement. And then we see the big jump afterwards. And we continue to see those big jumps with students with intellectual disabilities, emotional disabilities, learning disabilities, other health impairment, and autism. So across all of these groups, we're seeing that we are creating a more neurodiverse student body. Of course, that second piece was total computer science enrollment. What are we seeing with that? And along the bottom here, you'll see our general education so that we can have some comparison to their general education peers, those that maybe aren't being served on an IEP. And we see that for almost every subgroup, they're on pace with their peers. And not just taking that single year of coursework for the requirement, but on average taking 3 semesters. So an increase of interest in computer science for all of these groups. And if we look at a confidence interval, that band on each side of that average, we see that, yes, we have some that are taking just that required year, but others that are taking up to 2 years of enrollment for almost all subgroups. Our students that are deaf or hearing impaired are slightly behind, but you'll notice that band is really long. It's our smallest subgroup, so it's more difficult to really pinpoint the exact effect on them. And then our students with emotional disabilities lag behind a little bit as well, but are still in that bandwidth of meeting the requirement and showing some interest beyond. So our key takeaways for our students with disabilities, Chicago Public Schools significantly increased the percent of students with disabilities participating in computer science. CPS is creating a more neurodiverse student body in the computer sciences. For the most part, students across all disability categories are taking more computer science classes at a rate that's equivalent to general education students. And then one other key takeaway is students with emotional disabilities are taking computer science at a slightly lower rate than other disability groups, which gives us some opportunity to dig in and see how we can best support these students to continue to see growth in that area. so much.
All right, so thank you, Teresa. At this time, I'd like to invite Journey Easter to come up, a student at Phoenix STEM Military Academy. There's other students here as well, I guess. He might be out in the
And
hallway.
Morris, we should bring Morris in. So we are talking about results and data, but now we should hear from the students this impacts. And we have 3 students, one who we're going to track down and find. So he will join us. But Journey Easter is from Phoenix Military Academy. Jada Duncantel is from Collins, the Collins Academy. And so I'm just going to ask them a couple of questions. And is Morris there?
We're looking for him.
Okay. As Morris comes, he's also from Collins. But I want you to hear what they have to say about how the graduation requirement has impacted them. So I'm going to ask both of you and just answer however you want. Why don't you tell us what year you are in high school so we just know?
So I'm a sophomore.
I am also sophomore. So we have sophomore students here with us. So one thing you could tell us is if you were not required to take computer science, would you have taken a computer science class?
No.
Do you want to elaborate?
I didn't really know about computer science until I got to high school. So I don't know. People didn't really talk about computer science. So now that I know more about it, I want to take it, but at first probably.
Absolutely. So I've always loved computer science, but I've never actually understood how I can go deeper into it. It was always kind of like outside looking in kind of thing. So when I got into Collins, and I knew, like, especially since that was like my first class of the day, that was one of my favorite moments. Like, I just love computer science.
So the other thing I wanted to ask you is, so now that you've taken a class, right? Now that you've had that first, or maybe in some of your cases, second experience, is this something that you would consider continuing? Yes. Okay, would you like to elaborate? This is a really friendly crowd. I know it's hard for students to sometimes get up in front of talk in front of researchers and other people, but people really want to hear what you have to say. So feel confident.
I would definitely major in this for college.
You can come to the ball. We have an awesome program.
For UIC.
I feel like my school did a good job of exposing me to computer science, because they also told me about DPI, which was like a computer science program on the weekends where we had Google mentors. One of our mentors was Nikki. It's definitely, I like that since the world is evolved around technology, the fact that I can deal with it more and I could probably have a job in it, I like that.
Jada, what do you have to say?
I would absolutely consider continuing this. And not just because it's very good at helping me out with computer science, but also it's the way that they taught it. It was like, it actually took out time for me to actually understand it, because even though I do love computer science, I was very much struggling in the beginning, but it was like always the different ways they would explain it, and the different ways that they would backtrack and make sure everyone understood. It's definitely something I would want to continue, not just for computer science, but to also show kids that, as they said before, that you actually do have an opinion, you actually do have a voice, and it might take time, but you will understand.
And I guess my final question is, you're now role models at your schools, and they're now going to be on our student advisory committee. You have incoming freshmen who are like either nervous or like computer science, that's not for me, I don't like it. what would you say to a student who kind of maybe had your same hesitancy as a freshman, now that you've taken this and really learned you like it? What would you tell them?
I would kind of like give them some very good like projects that we'll be doing, like when we're like making the different games or like helping out with the coding. I would kind of like bait them into it, you know, to help them out, especially since I'm very friendly. So I already like recruited I recruited like 3 freshmen already. They're tired of hearing from me, but I'm already recruiting them for like computer science. They're joining me in robotics. They just don't know.
I would tell them not to be afraid, because I don't know, some computer and science together is, some people get the wrong impression. I would definitely say to take the class seriously and to actually try to enjoy it, because it's like at first, like learning all the different code blocks, it seems confusing, but it's like once you actually get it, it's a pretty fun class. So I would definitely tell them to try to enjoy it, take their time and don't rush.
Well, thank you. And everybody, I want you to see the future of computer science here in front of you, and please talk to them after the presentation.
So now we'll talk about how those experiences are leading to outcomes in computer science. So I'll invite June Pham to present on some of her research.
Hi everyone, I am June Pham. I'm a PhD candidate in evaluation, measurement, and research at Western Michigan University. So my project was looking at the impact of student experience on computer science course outcomes as a result of the graduation requirement. Specifically, I was looking at the difference in ECS course performance between students who were subject to the graduation requirement, or otherwise known as post-graduation requirement students, and those who took ECS as an elective, so otherwise known as a pre-graduation requirement students. So there were concerns about that the student might be not doing as well after the graduation requirement was introduced. So we can hypothesize that before the graduation requirement was enacted, the student might be more motivated or interested in computer science than the student who were kind of required to take it. So like in the case of Journey, that she said that she would not have taken the class without being like, because she was subject to it, right? So she would have had to take it. So so again, the concern is that if we see lower grades in the post-graduation requirement students, we might worry that the policy might affect the overall GPA or affect the likelihood that the student will graduate from high school on time. So this really struck me, and I was interested in this part of the project. So here's what I found. This graph shows the overall distribution of ECS course grades for pre-graduation requirement and post-graduation requirement students. And these 2 bars indicate the median grades. So as we can see, pre and post-graduation requirement students had kind of similar median grades, and the overall distribution looks very similar as well. So just note that this is part of our box and whisker plot. So there's no, the box represents 50% of the central distribution. And so there's no whisker on top. So the fall quantile is actually at 4 points. So it means that the box is actually showing 75%, not 50%, just to be clear. And so I conducted statistical analysis using multi-level modeling, where I control for various student, class, teacher, and school characteristics. And the results did confirm what we are seeing here, that there's no significant difference in ECS course grade between pre and post-graduation requirement students. And so overall, at least 50% of the students earn a B or higher, and the majority earn a C or higher in ECS. And I also looked at subgroups. In terms of gender, here we have a graph for the overall distribution of ECS course grade for male and female students, pre and post-graduation requirement environments. So just don't look at the difference, like you might see like between male and female, just look at the pre and post within each group first. And as we can see here, for male students, for example, they have this kind of similar median grade pre and post, and we have the same pattern for female. And the overall distribution looks very similar as well. And again, my statistical analysis confirmed this and suggests that there's actually no significant difference between pre and post graduation requirement score for males, within males, and also within females. And my study also found that there's actually males was doing better, female was doing better than males overall across the policy environments. And I also looked at race and ethnicity. So here's a graph for that showed the distribution of ECS course grades by different race and racial and ethnic groups. So the black bar shows the median grades for each of the subgroups. And so it looks like Hispanic students of other race, ethnicity categories, and white students were doing kind of better in the post environment compared to the pre environment. And while Asian students was kind of doing just as well. And African American students would just look like they're doing not as well in the post environment as compared to the pre environment. However, note that this graph just doesn't account for different factors or different characteristics of the student themselves or class or school that might be related to the outcome. So it's just purely showing the grades. And so my analysis, which accounted for those various characteristics, actually found that there's no difference, no significant difference between pre and post score for any of the groups here. And overall, African American student and Hispanic student was not doing as well as other demographic groups across the policy windows. And so the key takeaways here is that after the graduation requirements, students were performing just as well in ECS as those who took it as an elective before the policy was enacted. So I think this is to me is a success of the policy, because again, the student composition after the graduation requirement might not be again as universally highly motivated or interested in computer science. And students who identify as female earn higher grades than students who identify as males, controlling for various characteristics again. And so which is interesting to me, because computer science has been known as a male-dominated field. So that might be worth further investigating to see how, what factor that allow females to be outperforming. And finally, students who identify as African American or Hispanic students have slightly lower grades overall than other demographic groups. So this remains a sort of achievement gap that I think need to be addressed in future policy and practices moving forward. So this brings me to the end of my part, and I'm handing it over to Dr. Stephen. Thank you.
Our last but not least fellow to talk about future course taking. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sang-Kyu Kang. First of all, I feel privileged and honored to be part of this celebration. Congratulations to all of you in this room. Having heard students' voices, you may be curious about how the requirement changed the students' pathway to computer science course taking. I'm going to focus on the difference between pre and post requirement, the number of students taking a first and second computer science course. For the three cohorts here on the screen, before the requirement, the number of students taking their first stayed around 6,000. And out of those students, 17% went further to take a second course. The two cohorts, after the requirement, who were subject to requirement, proportion taking a second course was consistent, as you see here. However, the absolute number of students taking at least one course has substantially grown up, as you see on the screen here. The second course as well, the absolute number of students doubled after the requirement. As you see here as a graphic comparison. First course, double, as you see, and the second course, double as well. Again, the impact of the graduation requirement on the course taking is quite clear. Doubling the number of students taking their first and the second course as well. Here, it is important to note that continuing efforts are needed to address equity issues because female students and Hispanic students are still less likely to pursue additional coursework in computer science than their counterparts, even after the enactment of graduation requirement. That's all from me. Back to Steve.
All right, well, thank you. Another round of applause for our fellow. From CDS. Thanks for bearing with us through our technical difficulties. I just wanted to share a few closing remarks, and then we'll actually invite Chris back from CPS also to give some concluding remarks. But CPS was the first district to create a graduation requirement. We know a lot of other districts are also considering that. So we just have some few thoughts and ideas and advice for other districts. So one, teachers are the most important ingredient to make this work. And so I think the ECS professional development, I think, really honored and supported teachers as exemplified by Faith's testimony. But I think it's really important to focus on capacity building before you actually enact significant policies. We've seen so many places around the country that sort of jump right in to like, oh, we need computer science. Oh, but wait a minute, we're going to get teachers from. So I think that was really strategic of CPS to have that foundation of capacity building before enacting the environment. Courageous leadership is what's needed. Think back to the graphs we saw. Only half of the schools even offer computer science. 60 schools didn't even have a teacher to provide computer science at the time this was enacted. So I think it really was foundational to see the trajectory, to know we can get there, we have the right team in place. So I think that was really important. Brenda also, I think, provided a nice vision along with her team for convincing the board and senior leadership that there's a path to get there. And so I think it was just great courage on the part of the senior leadership and the board to enact such a monumental policy in the face of uncertainty. So I think we need to acknowledge their courage, but also the courage of all the team to really make this come about in 4 years. Just in terms of the next frontiers, I think this research has really highlighted that yes, there's a lot of success in getting there, but there's some challenges that remain. And so I think we need to keep the pedal to the metal, to keep working to create all and mean all for all students. And some of the future areas is really working on ensuring access across the district to that additional coursework. One of the things that Sankyu didn't highlight in his talk was access to computer science, additional courses was key. If you don't have another course, you can't have access. So that's something that we want to continue to work on. And then looking to the next frontier of how can we reduce barriers at the higher ed level? 14,000 students a year graduating with CS. What can we do to help them as they move on to college? And then I think also this is really near and dear to Chris's heart, continuing to increase that access at the K-8 level to increase opportunities in K-12. So I will actually put up a big thank you slide to all of the partners that aren't represented here, but all of our funders. And with that, I'll invite Chris up to give some concluding remarks.
So I am not going to talk for very long because I know everybody wants to get to the reception and talk to each other. But one thing I want to say, we talked about Cafe CS, we've talked about the research, the teachers in the room. Really, many of you in this room need to be thanked, right? There are people here who are corporate partners, nonprofit partners, research partners from internally in CPS. Lots and lots of people helped make this possible, right? And so the work that we do now, really, we stand on the shoulders of all of this that's come before us, right? We couldn't be in the position we're in now to advance and expand without all of this work that's been done. And so part of what I want you to know is that what Stephen said about the next frontier, so to speak, we really need to expand. We've given these opportunities to students. Every student in the district now has the opportunity to take computer science in high school. But how many students have access to a second course? We are now back in equity purposes of looking at half of our high schools not having the ability to offer a second course. So really our work for equity and access and what we need to do is not over. We're really at that place right now where we're like, wow, CPS is in a great position to really move forward because we haven't fixed the whole pipeline. You know, computer science and industry still doesn't look the way we want it to look in terms of diversity and in terms of who's going into college for computer science. So we've given opportunities to our students, but we want to make sure that we can continue to expand that for all to every single student that wants to continue and move forward in some way with computer science. So just so you know, we're continuing to innovate. How do we improve access? Well, we're working with the Learning Partnership and hopefully we have another grant coming up that we can't quite say yet. But we want to take the lessons that we learned about cultural relevance and the importance of relating to our students and engaging students and start applying it to the next coursework. So if we are expanding AP-CSP because it's something we think we can scale, we don't want to lose those lessons that we learned from ECS, right? We don't want to lose lessons about the importance of PD for teachers and building that community and creating that cultural relevance. So we are going to be working very hard as we expand to keep applying what we've learned. We are increasing access to our diverse learners, right? We've seen some of the research. So this year we have a PLC for our cluster teachers, right? So our profound and severely disabled students will have access to this computer science coursework. And we can bring more of those diverse ways of thinking into this field. And finally, we have to be creative because we're not going to be able to solve all these problems of small schools or access, you know, having enough qualified teachers overnight, right? For those second and third classes. So We learned some things in remote, right? So we have a virtual academy at CPS that used to be just for fragile students, health fragile students. But now what we're doing is we're starting a hub for computer science. So while it might not be the most ideal situation, we want to make sure that every student, no matter the size of their school or if there's a teacher at their school, can at least have access to that second class by going to the virtual academy. And all of you partners out there, I know you're out there. You're going to support those students because you're going to bring field trips and mentors and all these people so that they can have a high quality experience where they get those relationships, even though they're in a virtual environment. So those are just like kind of giving you a preview, but I just want to say, we want to thank you and we want to continue to do the same kind of high quality work, right? That we're not just trying things and sort of winging it. We really are working on computer science with research at the core so that we know for sure what is that impact we're having on students and teachers and schools and the communities that we're serving. So thank all of you out here because you helped everybody do this. So.
You forgot to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry.
She's the director of the Office of Computer Science at CPS. So
I forgot I
one of the
didn't have
many
a
through the
slide.
12 years. So, well, I'm not going to say anything more because I'm standing between you and a drink. So thank you for coming. Thank you for the people online, and thank you for being patient on the little glitches. And there is food and drinks.